really utilizing that unique blueprint of each individual, there's so much that we can accomplish as groups and communities and on an individual level.
Welcome to Resilience Redefined. I'm your host, Michael Osterlink. This show is about building better humans, institutions, and systems. On the show, I'll be interviewing many different experts from across many different fields, including human optimization, health and fitness, team building, mind-body medicine. In the institutional space, we're looking at different institutions and how we can create new ones, new models and maps, including in medicine, in education, in intelligence community, in law enforcement, in the military, especially in the special operations community. Thanks for being here and enjoy the show. Welcome to Resilience Redefined. I'm your host, Michael Osterlink, and today's guest is Cee McDermott. Cee is a co-founder and CEO of Mosaic Biodata. Cee brings over 2 decades of experience in human performance, including 16 years as a special agent with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. She now works with executives, government officials, and special operations teams, applying her unique blend of expertise in law enforcement, behavioral sciences, and human optimization. Her work spans from training intelligence communities to consulting on human performance for the Department of Defense. With expertise and interest in fields ranging from holistic health to epigenetics, Cee helps organizations and individuals unlock their full potential.
All right, welcome, Cee. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Michael.
So we're going to talk about unlocking human potential beyond conventional limits, which is a topic of great interest to you. And before we kind of jump into that topic, I'm curious, more about you. What leads you to have such an interest in human potential, generally speaking, and in this case, talking about beyond conventional limits? And I imagine you mean the whole human system, not just a piece of the human system when you talk about beyond the limits of what's possible for us as humans.
Yeah, actually, even when I'm talking about what's beyond the limits, I really think that even applies to the system of humans versus the human system, right?
Nice.
So what we as humans, encompassing all humans, are capable of, because it's quite vast. And I have a deep interest in genomics, and that's kind of my more recent work is kind of focused on, but really utilizing that unique blueprint of each individual, there's so much that we can accomplish as groups and communities and on an individual level. But it does take a level of cohesion in communities that in kind of mainstream thought right now that we might be kind of missing.
100%. And you and I actually met originally at a longevity conference quite a few years ago, and hit it off on multiple different topics, including longevity. And you just mentioned genomics, and I'd love for you just to kind of do, and because you have a book out too, so I'd like you to talk about your book, but also just a little of your background. Why epigenetics of interest to you? How do you utilize it for your own health and well-being? How do you use it with clients? And if you could expand beyond just that, because you also talked about kind of teams and groupings of human beings, not just the system within a human, but between humans too. And how might that thinking that you have apply to the broader human dynamic, not just within humans?
Yeah. So it's kind of epigenetics is such genetics and epigenetics and genomic baselines are such a broad topic. It can kind of go like super granular all the way up to just like what is the human system, and really more or less has evolution just we haven't caught up to evolution, right? Like we are living indoors, we are eating processed foods, we are living a lifestyle that evolution just can't catch up with. We essentially, the industrial age is, I believe it would start at 11:59 and 36 seconds if the history of the universe was broken down into a 24-hour day, right? So it's about 3 seconds of a 24-hour day comparatively. And that being said, we are living outside of what we were really evolved to live, and we're catching up, right? So there's epigenetic changes that you'll see from generation to generation that we're starting to almost make those epigenetic changes, which really just doesn't determine any kind of outcomes, but really it's a dimmer switch, right? So we're turning it up, turning it down, depending on our lifestyle. So if you're let's say ApoE44, you have a higher risk of cognitive decline as you age. And we're seeing that cognitive decline younger and younger these days. But it turns out that that's actually also an adaptation of people that originally lived in the Amazon and that's kind of where the 4-4 started. And it's anti-parasitic. So it's actually very helpful.
Wow. Okay.
And people that live in the Amazon, of course, had not really been exposed to any modern conveniences, food, things, when this was kind of discovered in, I guess, more recent times. But essentially that was protective, right? Like, so if you have exposure to parasites, you're less likely to really suffer from them. And that's passed from generation to generation. And that's kind of how epigenetics works. You basically inherit 3.2 million base pairs from a mother, 3.2 million base pairs from a father. You have 6.4 million base pairs. Some of those nucleotide polymorphisms. And those just determine kind of some pre-existing factors that are completely changeable with lifestyle and, nutrition and exercise. We know that, people will say, I have insulin resistance in my family, or, probably refer to it as type 2 diabetes. So I must be inheriting that. And it's really not deterministic in any way, but we're keeping in mind that you also inherit many of your lifestyle factors from your parents. So, from the house that you grew up in, if you grew up with your parents, you likely inherited a lot of their mindset, a lot of their exercise habits, probably most of their eating habits, right? And that's what kind of your foundation, your baseline was built on. So we know that, twins that have been separated and raised in different households have vastly different outcomes, even though they have identical DNA. So utilizing that information, we really go from what can I do to kind of like make myself healthier, right? So I guess the last, maybe let's say 50 years, people would say, well, I should probably exercise and I should probably eat this or that the government has told me to eat. Let's say like the food pyramid, right? That might be flawed information at this point. I think we're pretty well aware the food pyramid is flawed. However, most of the things that we kind of think we need to do, we should do. It's actually really a lot of the boring stuff. Now, we can get super technical and we can get into crazy brain training and all these really different types of training, but really just moving your body more, sleeping more soundly, stressing less, no processed foods, it's the boring stuff that really makes a difference. And the way that I got started in epigenetics was really, I was a federal agent with Homeland Security for many years, and I was, working a pretty high stress job, but I still wanted to kind of do something different. So I started doing some like personal training and things on the side, outside work authorization, of course. And
of course, full disclosure.
And what I found was that a lot of people were really interested in like working out and getting fit, but then I would see the same people just kind of like leaving class and like guzzling wine and, so maybe like gossiping at the end of class and just kind of almost kind of hanging out in a more toxic environment that just, and then coming to me and saying, we really can understand why, like, I'm not feeling better, or I feel better for a little bit, but then I kind of backslide. And then recognizing that really nutrition's part of it. And then recognizing that nutrition is super personalized. And that's kind of how I found the idea of like nutrigenomics and epigenetics. And really, I think a lot of the things that we can probably glean from epigenetics, like and genetic baselines, might not be all that impactful for some people. If you have to make huge changes in your lifestyle and you're living a very standard American lifestyle, there might not be much information that you can grab from your genetics. But if you're starting to do all of the things, or you've done all the things, maybe there's a lot of people that are like, I do not have a huge transformational story. I just do all the things, but kind of that modern lifestyle is starting to kind of tear me down around like 40, 45, 50. And that's kind of where I end up seeing people is usually stressed out, like high performers start to notice that maybe they need to do some calibration. And that's where kind of like looking at genomics with individual people really makes that difference. And then those really high performers that need to think just fractions of a second faster in life and death situations, and some that are maybe not life and death, but definitely high impact situations. That's when we can start to really look at cognitive health and cognitive speed, processing speed, memory, recall, and learning speed and accelerated learning pathways. And that's where my current work has been taking me.
That's awesome and very exciting. I love our conversations offline. I'm glad we're actually recording one finally. And it's interesting because I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, because we talk about kind of conventional versus what I would call kind of post-conventional, like optimization of the human, optimization of the teams, et cetera, et cetera. But the framework not you and I use, but the framework that's generally used is like, oh, you're not sick, you're okay. Or maybe these days, like you're sick, but not too sick. Like, yeah, of course you're chronically ill because everyone's chronically ill, but that's just kind of the norm now.
Right.
So
The
we don't,
average being 65% of people have more than one chronic disease. So the average, are we talking means or medians or averages? It comes down to what is average, and its average continues to be a chronic disease and at least two medications. So that's not a standard that I want for people. It's not what a standard I want for myself or my family, but I also want better for the population.
everyone, right. And I know you do work with the military and law enforcement and things like that. And I've seen recent that the Department of Defense is having a hard time recruiting because of the obesity epidemic, plus drug use and other such problems in our youth. Mm-hmm. So like it's disturbing to see these trends go downward. Like the younger and younger people are getting more and more different kinds of chronic illnesses.
There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things at play there, and it does come down to drug use, mental illness, and really but many of these things are lifestyle diseases, right? These are kind of, some of them are diseases of despair, quite honestly. We've had a rough couple of years as a nation, as a world, as a population. And, for some people, COVID was like a big eye opener, and it helped a lot of people find their purpose and their health. And I imagine for a lot of young people, it was really disparaging. So, a tough time to maybe graduate college or be in school. And so knowing that those are all lifestyle factors that as a population, we can do better for our young people and really set them up for success. I mean, there's so many factors at play, right? Because we always talk about complex systems, and anytime you're talking about the human system, there's no linear thinking here. So like, because let's say, poor nutrition leads to mental health issues. Yes. And so do toxic environments. So do, too many screens on a daily basis. So does, learning pathways that don't actually individuate for each person. Instead, kind of teaching to the lowest common denominator so that then students get bored and disengage. So there's a lot of different factors at play. And to pinpoint any one of them is nearly impossible. But knowing where we can make changes, there's some obvious ones that we know we need to make a change, right? We need to make a change to our food system. We need to make a change to the way that we interact with each other. That, we talk on Zoom, like probably you and I talk on Zoom and text probably like most often. I've only seen you in person in the last 5 years, like 4 times.
Right.
So while that's really cool, because now, we have people we can engage with that we weren't able to before, young people are missing out on that interaction. And you and I grew up, I don't know about you, but I certainly didn't have a cell phone. Parents didn't know where I was. I had some amount of freedom, right, as I was growing up. I used to when you're a young person, you would show up, let's say, like at the club, or you'd show up at the bar, or you'd show up at a friend's house or a party. You have no idea who's going to be there. You have no idea where the night's going to go. And it would just kind of lead to experiences that, good, bad, or indifferent, you at least still interacted with individual people and groups of people, where now, you kind of know exactly where everybody is and where everybody's going and who's going to be there. And exactly, you can curate every moment of every day. Which leaves out some of the curiosity that people get to kind of cultivate as they grow up.
I love you to go 2 different streams. The theme of the podcast is on resilience, and resilience within the human system, but it's also in relationships and teams, institutions, and systems as well. And you talk about kind of social engagement, which you just started talking about, and I'd love to go further down that path. But before we do, the food system and the various institutions that benefit from the present day food system. And I'll be curious for you, like, hey, if you had the magic wand and you could shift this food system to something else, while recognizing bioindividuality, like, everyone's diet might be unique based on their genetics. Cool. But what would your magic wand create for us in terms of the food system and availability for Americans or all humans on the planet Earth?
Yeah, I mean, for any human, I think eating real food is hugely important, right? Eliminating processed foods, ultra processed foods, processed foods in the sense like, that I'm constantly baking bread for my kids. I make sourdough, like for the
I've seen.
lunches.
Oh, I
Like
do.
my kids do eat bread and everything. I use like locally milled grains, and 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 yet, like, so that's a processed food, right? Technically, because I've made it, but when it comes to ultra processed food, like no one's genetics are like, yes, give me Oreos, right? Like that's not really food meant for humans. It's a sometimes thing. That's fine. And I understand there's a lot of dollars at play here. So it's really huge systems. There's a lot of work being done in that area. This is really kind of come to the forefront with this recent presidential election because we have Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Yeah,
really
yeah.
really taking a really big stand against big food, and knowing that really the consumers speak the loudest with our dollars. So, if you do enjoy processed foods, maybe just attempt to buy like the healthier ones. And if not, buy from your local farmer. I saw someone with a t-shirt the other day that said, don't buy food from strangers. And I love that. I
Nice,
know.
nice.
And yet I know there are significant limitations to that because I know my local farmer and I go every week to a regenerative farm here in New Jersey. It's prohibitively expensive. And I go to, let's see, I order some food from White Oak Pastures. I order some meat from Georgia, which has probably a pretty big footprint because it's coming from far away. And then I get all of my pork and eggs locally, just from like a local family nearby. But I literally go to like 6 places a week, and it takes a lot of resources, a lot of time, and a lot of money to do all of that. And that's just to feed a family of four. And I probably spend $1,000 a week on food. So is that reasonable for everyone? Like, probably not, right? Like, that's what it takes to eat grass-fed, real whole foods. And not to mention, like, every time that you see me on a call, I know I'm probably in the background baking, right? Like, I'm or something, right? Like, I'm always in my kitchen.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
Now, I feel super lucky, and I have actually really built my life around that because it is the number one priority for my family, that I have personally. And I understand that most people, maybe it might not be a priority or even in the top 10 priorities, right? Like I get that. So what can we do to take something like that where we have grass-fed beef and we have farm raised chickens and real food from a regenerative sense, regenerative farms that aren't hurting the planet, no factory farming, but actual, real food as humans are meant to eat food. It doesn't seem complicated, but there is a very strong system in place that does make it a little bit more complex than just saying, okay, well, we'll put, farm food on food stamps so that people in urban areas can get more farm. It's not super feasible. Uh, I spend a lot of time thinking, how can I contribute to this? And pretty much all I've come up with in the last maybe decade is to serve as an example, and then just kind of, if people ask me about what I think is best, I let them know, but I try not to prophesize to people either, because I understand there are limited resources for most families, especially in 2024. And even just time as a commodity, we don't always have time to
Right, right.
bake fresh bread, right? And Costco is a cheaper option, and it is a option that makes people sick over time and like day in, day out. Um, so yeah, I just try to kind of keep my head above water as far as that goes. But if I could wave my magic wand, it would certainly be for the processed food companies to actually just listen to consumers and say, hey, stop using seed oils. We want real food. If they are processed foods or convenience foods, just make them a little bit less full of artificial flavors and colors. We don't necessarily need all those things. There's a lot of additives in food in this country that I think is coming to light that just aren't in other
Right, right.
countries. And I spent last summer in Europe with my family, and it's a lot there too. I was quite surprised, really. It was kind of sad to see that a lot of parts of Spain, we were in Ireland, it's pretty similar. It's not as significant, but it's not much better. So I think we need to do better as an example in America, and probably, Europe will follow suit as well, and probably keep the things moving towards an economy that actually supports regenerative farming and healthy agriculture. And that kind of happens on a governmental level, so we can talk about policy.
Well, yeah, and maybe that could be a different conversation because there are perverse incentives built into the tax structure and regulation and subsidies that make it so much more inexpensive to buy the crap versus the other real food.
I went to a potluck for cross country here in town. I coach cross country for my kids, and they had like a sign up for the potluck, and I bought a thing of cut up fruit because it was on the way and I didn't know about it until like that day. It's my husband's scheduling error. And I got a thing of fruit for $25 that was pre-cut. That wouldn't be a choice I would normally make, but it was, this is the container is this big, it serves, 10 people. I could have actually bought, 10 servings of fruit. I could have bought 72 donuts for the same cost because I did the math. And that I could have served 72 people a donut. Like that's a big disparity to me. Just one example, right?
Yeah. Well, hopefully federal policy will change in the very near future to support what I would call for actually a true free market and real options in the food space, not these kind of manufactured pretend free market type things that we have. But that's another conversation. Today we're talking about, kind of like there's a conventional understanding of what's possible and your role, part of your role in this world, to say that's the old model, this is the new model. We have so much more potential than we believe we have. So you walk through some of the dietary choices that you think would make the human system a little bit healthier. That's awesome. And I would love, because I know you're also like a Kundalini, among the many million things you do, you're also a Kundalini yoga instructor. And I'd love for you to talk a little about kind of the mind-body connection, breath work, movement practices, things along those lines, as well as spiritual evolution, consciousness evolution, and how important that is to understand what's actually possible, potentially, for us as human beings.
Yeah, and I think that is so individual. Kundalini yoga is interesting because sometimes you meditate for, 2 or 3 hours, and yet sometimes the daily practice is like 20 minutes. It just kind of depends on what's fitting into your lifestyle at the moment. It's certainly made a big difference in my life. The ability to meditate, and I know I used to be on board with, I've always meditated, but I used to be on board with like meditate 2 minutes a day and you'll want to do more. But I find most people fall off unless they really start getting into meditating. So I really start with 32 minutes of meditating. 10 minutes is too long to let people get bored. And I get that. But magic starts to happen at like 30 minutes, 60 minutes. And it doesn't have to be every time. It's just when you've had the ability to hold meditation for extended periods of time, things start to make no sense and all the sense in the world at the same time. And it sounds unusual, but even just in the evolution of the human, we have the ability to do much more than we believe we are capable of. There's a ton of scientific research, and there's also just ancient wisdom that this is possible, right? We know, I know kind of controversial, let's say like Wim Hof, right? Wim Hof is able to go into basically regulate his body temperature, right? And he's trained others to do this. So we know it's possible. But Buddhist monks have been doing that for a few thousand years.
Yes, they have.
And I love that we can put some science to it.
Yeah.
I personally don't need a double-blind study to understand that something could have a positive effect and give it a shot. But that's just me. So, if we need more science around it, great. We have the ability to do that. It seems like there's a lot of research being done. But what I love is that if you try something and it works for you, it works, right? So if it's a vinyasa yoga class, if it's a walking meditation, if it's just a guided meditation just to get you started, but it's a significant amount of time, I think that's when the change starts to happen. And then just realizing your place.
Let me ask you a question. What's the change that you suggest people might notice happening that's going from ordinary to extraordinary or higher potential?
Yeah, and I think it really just comes down to cognitive processing speed increases significantly. Awareness of everything around you. And if you've been in meditation for a long time and you've had this kind of state experience where it starts to get a little bit, it's kind of hard to put into words, but if you've had one of these state experiences where you come out, right now it's fall in New Jersey, so the leaves are really bright and very pretty. It's too bright behind me to see, but so you look outside and the sky's a little bit bluer and the trees are a little bit brighter, and it's the awareness of the awareness that becomes apparent, that it starts as a state experience and it really just becomes much more of a stage in your life where you're noticing everything around you, and you come to a moment where you're like, this is hard, or this person, and you can really take a pause, and it's purposeful. Like, you have to, train yourself to do it, but you can take that pause and kind of look around and say, okay, well, what's really going on here? What is making me like uncomfortable about this person? Realizing that person may just be kind of a reflection of what I'm going through or what I've experienced and that I find as a challenge. And also just realizing kind of how insignificant maybe that exact moment may be, while also being wildly significant, because every choice that you make, whether there's free will or not, I know we have this conversation before, but every choice that you make does have an outcome. So whether that's predetermined or not is a different discussion, but knowing that each moment does matter, in the sense that you can really influence everyone around you with your attitude and your mindset, including yourself, right? On a cellular level, your body's saying, is it safe out there? Are we safe? And then there's like a surveillance system in your body. Is it safe to kind of come out? Is it safe to digest my food right now? If it's not, long term, I have IBS, right? And or I stay in fight or flight, or and then now I'm not sleeping right. Excuse me. I recently got my boys a kitten, and and it's adorable. But he's like super hyper. I never had a kitten. I had no idea. And I feel like I'm sleeping like tense because this cat is like freaking me out. And of course it's not a mountain lion chasing me, right? But I'm just nervous for the cat. I don't want to get hurt or something, and I don't want to wake up my kids. But it's like this idea that I can't relax because I have this kitten in my house. Like, the same thing happens with people, like emails and like their boss calling, or trying to like stay on Teams active because they're supposed to be working from home, or traffic, or just all these things that people can kind of build up that are part of daily life, but just coming back into the body and realizing, like, what are we doing? Like, let's, come back into that homeostasis. And when you really utilize, say, mindfulness or meditation, it just makes you realize that we have created this kind of like little system, right? And it's been working for a while. But you're outside of that. And then it doesn't really apply anymore.
Let me ask you this, because you said homeostasis, and I could imagine it's a dynamic homeostasis with higher levels of functioning as you do the inner work and develop the inner resources. So like someone who just got off the couch, doesn't eat well, doesn't work out, doesn't do mindfulness practices, no spiritual practices, they have a homeostasis, but it's kind of a downregulated one. If they do all the things that we're discussing, that their system gets upregulated. So it's a different level of homeostasis, still homeostasis, but it's a higher level of functioning. It's dynamic, so it can adapt to stressors in the environment, but you have such self-awareness that you're like, oh, I can put this amount of time and effort and energy into this thing. There's going to be a cost to my system. I have good enough interception. I'm like, oh, there's a cost to my system. I need to rest and recover. I mean, is that kind of some of the stuff I'm hearing?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And somebody recently asked me, like, how are you transitioning into kind of being an entrepreneur after being in the government so long? Because he was like, from what I understand, the government's like, you don't have a lot of agency. And after a long discussion, I was like, I was just underperforming, because I was asked to. I wasn't allowed to overperform, and it's not that like I was, I'm not complaining. It was just the system was set so that I was asked to do certain things. Excuse me, and I did those things. Where now, maybe I am asking myself to do many more things, and one of which includes 250 push-ups a day. Michael, are you on? But and some of them are physical, but a lot of things are just like, build this company, build this thing, right? And those are things that I'm putting on myself that maybe I feel called to do, or that feels like a vocation to me. And if it is in alignment and it works, then it's really easy. It really, truly is. And some of the stuff, like, I don't want to do, right? And some of the stuff we still have to do. And then some of the stuff you hire out. But knowing that you have that choice, that ability to kind of go beyond the limits of like, oh, well, I already have a company, so I don't need more work to do. And it's, no, there's more work to be done. So go do it.
But for you, like, so we talked about nutrition, we talked about a little bit of fit. Actually, let's get into fitness. You talked about push-ups. A lot of the inner work, like the spiritual development work. Let's kind of take a segue down into the fitness side, because you talked about your 250 push-ups. And I would encourage anyone to check you out on Instagram. You put some great stuff out, especially when you travel with all your working out at the gym and some of your walking you do and things like that. But talk about the importance of physical training for you, and also generally speaking for us, as well as movement, not so specific to doing physical training.
I think it's really hard for your brain to work really well when you're not moving. I think it just comes down to that. And I think, at least for me, and I know that if other people find that time and time again, that it must be true. But it really is like, if you're getting more blood to your brain and you're just moving your body, I mean, listen, your muscles act as basically like an absorption of insulin, right? So we just like get rid of the sugars in our body. Halloween's tomorrow. So if you're eating any Halloween candy, which of course, eat Halloween candy, fine. But the more muscle you have, the easier that your body digests that, the better your metabolic health will be. But your metabolic health is so important in allowing the brain to function well. And I think without a functioning brain, it's all part of the system, right? But I do like to lift weights 5 or 6 times a week, and we started a push-up challenge in like April, and then we just didn't stop it, so it's still going. But I don't recommend doing, of course, I'm probably going to have overuse injuries over the course of time, but for now, I'm continuing. And really just any way that you move your body, any way that makes sense, right? Like, I'm super into strength training right now. I used to be really into running, used to run a lot of marathons and stuff. That's just not my jam anymore. It takes too much time, but I really like to work out. I have a home gym, so my kids get ready in the morning for school and stuff, and I can get my workout in. And even when it's like kind of a tight time schedule, you can get something in. And then I like to go walking, and I spend a lot of time outdoors and just try to get that outside time as well. I think that's really important, and it just makes sense. People need to be in nature. We don't need to be on outdoors.
100%. And for the overuse, we're just sending to Dr. Jimmy. He can fix you up.
Yeah. Well, and you can always, that comes down to the nutrition and the support too that you need for.
Yeah. BPC 157.
I won't repeat it.
All right. So physical training is really important to you, obviously. If you're going to give advice, generally speaking, to an audience that was like, they're not already dialed in, they're not, seal fitting or crossfitting or training up for an event, but they do hear and they recognize the need for something. What would you recommend? Is just like, hey, here's a first step to get to above average before you head off to, maybe if you want to become a high performer or elite performer. Those steps.
I would start with walking.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. I walk most of the time. Most of my cardio is walking, quite honestly. And I think we're rucking. So walking with weight, or hiking, which is really just walking with different shoes, quite honestly. But yeah, just walking outside. I understand everybody has different climates and different times, and it might be dark when you leave for work, but if you can get time outside, get it. And then there's actually recently a study that is they did a study on people went to the gym for 1 hour a day, like really hard, and then the rest of the day was super sedentary in an office setting. And then they had the same office, half of the office went for a 3-minute walk every 20 minutes of the workday, and they actually increased their metabolic health and cardiovascular health and lowered their triglycerides more so than the people that went to the gym for an hour a day. So it's kind of continuous movement. It's that throughout the day movement. So again, like going hard in the gym and then sitting at a chair in one position. Cause I know like I have a standing desk, but it's still one position after a while. So you have to like sit, you have to stand, you have to kind of move around. That's one thing where it's like just not one position, right? So even just standing in one position, also not wonderful. But just that 20 minutes, 3 minutes walk every 20 minutes makes a big difference.
I love to see the research because with my clients, I make a distinction between exercise and movement. Like, hey, you do your hour of cardio or your barre or kung fu, whatever your thing is, run, whatever. But like, that's not the same as actually breaking up your day and going for a walk or doing some qigong or tai chi or some yoga. You literally need to, every certain period of time, get up and move the body because it's not designed to, like you said, sit in the same position hour after hour after hour after hour.
Exactly. Yeah. And just, it's the outside of exercise time that really needs, like the body needs to move. And so there's a story I just told my kids the other day. There's an animal called the sea squirt. And I think my husband just walked by and heard me say that. So he always loves this. He loves stories. There's an animal called the sea squirt. And if you look it up, it's like what I thought was like a sea anemone, but it's called a sea squirt. And it's pretty, but it has these little tentacles and it floats around the ocean. And then when it hits coral, it has a spinal cord and a brain. So its ability to move is contained within the spinal cord and brain. And then when it attaches to coral, it actually dissolves its brain and spinal cord because it doesn't need it anymore because it's not going to move. So I told the story to my kids and I said, what does that tell you that you have a brain? And what does it tell you? And they said that because we have brains, we're meant to move. There you go. So from the mouths of science.
Yeah, so I'd be curious, is brain volume decrease and the kind of the connections?
Brain volume decreases when movement decreases, yes.
Yeah, so literally like we are just bigger versions of the same. It just takes us a lot longer to get stupid. Maybe, well, I don't know.
Let's say lose our brains. With proper movement and nourishment of the body that we get smarter.
Yeah, I like that even better. So you had mentioned you mentioned rucking, and earlier in this conversation, you had talked about the kind of the importance of social engagement. And I know the longevity research. Yeah, of course, there's diet, nutrition, fitness, movement, stress management, but a lot of it actually shown the importance of like not being isolated, being connected to other human beings, having meaning, purpose, all that kind of wonderful things. And this is kind of a nice segue to talk about both social engagement, tribe, and rucking, and our team foodership. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, what drove you into your interest in joining forces to create this team foodership?
I think that you started rucking, and I was like, this sounds like a great way to make walks harder. So I was like, yeah, I'll just throw a backpack on. I still don't have a real ruck. I just have a backpack that I've had for years. And I have a medical textbook and like a 10-pound weight in it. And I have some of my like local mom friends joining me on rucks too, by the way.
Oh, cool. That's cool.
Because they live near a state park and it's beautiful and there's like waterfalls and everything. So yeah, I just kind of leave my house and go rucking. I don't know if people think I'm like going somewhere, but I just go for a walk. They think I have this backpack. I don't know. I'm not super concerned with what people see, but yeah, just for even just like 3-5 miles. You really can burn somewhere between like 20 to 30% more calories if you're interested in burning calories. I'm not like a calorie counter myself, but I think it just builds, stronger legs. And I know we have very recent research that is very indicative that really quad and glute strength is very much correlated to not only just longevity, but the health span, right? So the stronger your quad and glute muscles are, the less likely you are to age poorly.
Oh, okay. I'd love to see that research as well. And actually, I want to encourage folks, if you're on LinkedIn, please follow Cee, because she puts out literally daily, right? Some amazing research.
Yeah, it's kind of whenever it occurs to me.
Yeah.
I don't always talk about longevity. Sometimes, like the other day, I just talked about the meaning of I think it was today. Bases of words. So traction and distraction are from the same. Because I
saw your post.
I took Latin in high school, so I'm a nerd, I guess. But I just come up with whatever's in my crazy head, when I'm doing my thinking time in the morning, and then I'll just take a note and post it later. So just kind of whatever I'm thinking about. But I'm currently actually working with an integral specialist in leadership. So looking at each of the worldviews through this kind of different lenses in leadership. And so that's kind of what I'm really hoping to bring to Team Fudoshine is, as we start to work with executive teams, is be able to kind of teach leadership and how to communicate in leadership.
Yeah, and I think that could be another great conversation we can have, number 2 or 3 when you come back for these kind of conversations. And say a little bit more, because okay, rucking, you saw me rucking. It's like, this is a great exercise. Cool that you have some partners in crime there rocking with you. But what about Team Fudoshine itself? Because the team part, I know you mentioned at the very beginning that teams are important to you. They play a huge role in.
And I think when I know, essentially when you start to kind of think outside the box, right? And I actually mentioned it to my kids, I think it was literally this morning. They asked me about something that was very mainstream. And I said, that's for people in the Matrix. And they said, what's the Matrix? And I said, people that believe all the mainstream stuff. And they said, so not us, right? Like, so, maybe I'm brainwashing them a little, but essentially when you start thinking outside the box, it can be a little bit isolating because it can be kind of, people may not, like the people that you've associated with in the past might just be like kind of confused or feel left behind, or, if you don't have kind of people to bounce things off of, or a place to look for guidance, advice, and mentor, or somebody to mentee as well. Without that kind of community, it can be isolating. Like, am I wrong about the food system here? Because everybody I know is going to Costco. Is that good? Or should I just do that? What is the, what is the critical thinking component here, right? So being able to bounce things off people and spend time with other people that do want to push themselves physically and mentally and spiritually. Like, what are the next things that we're going to do? What, if we're living in a pretty limited, say, space or community or circle of friendships, without that kind of expansion, we can start to stagnate, really. So being able to push each other and be able to listen to each other in community, and then really, the physical challenge really is where you make bonds. When I was a special agent, there was never people I was closer with when I was working with until you were like in the shit together, right? Like when you were, you go through those experiences, and then like you're kind of, whether they're physical or emotionally demanding, or, like death-defying things, then suddenly you really make bonds with people. Same thing when you're going through a really long ruck or an endurance event. Like, I've run a marathon with my husband many years ago at this point. And it was fun, like it was it was also my slowest marathon ever, just saying, but not because he slowed me down, because it's 2 people.
Oh, okay. All right. We won't blame.
But yeah, like being able to do these endurance events with people, like you go through, a lot. And then you actually have like a group of people that understands what you're thinking or understands what you're going through, or, hey, like I'm still a mom in a small town. I still go to the PTO meetings, and like tomorrow I'm doing the Halloween party for my kids' 1st grade class. Right. So you still need a community, kind of in all aspects of life. But like my endurance community, that's cool. Like we've been, meeting weekly lately just to set everything up, and we're going to be doing some events. And the endurance events are really neat. And I think it's where you like learn a little bit more about yourself, maybe about your team, if you're with people, or you start to create kind of that tribe too, if you don't have that team yet. And that's where you kind of find them.
Right on. And also, I think the research shows the importance of that. I mean, not necessarily joining a tribe where you push yourself to the edge physically, just having people you can rely on and support each other and hold each other accountable. And, that is seemingly so much missing in our world today, especially here in the States. We're very isolated. I think COVID showed us more clearly that we are isolated and made it even worse. And I don't know that we've actually recovered from that. And I don't know if you've seen the research, but I believe the research is showing that we're becoming less empathetic too over time. I don't know if as a species wide, but at least here in the States, which doesn't bode well for us here in the United States, or as a species more broadly. So community is important, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you working with individuals these days?
Not as often, but yes. So Mosaic Biodata is essentially we're gathering all of the aspects of the human experience, but mainly focused on biological data, so wearables and blood labs and things, but we're also bringing in some of those community aspects, and we're trying to like kind of everything that is currently measurable, and then we'll be adding things as they come online that are measured, like cortisol receptor. I know you saw that text the other day. Woo-hoo.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's still in stealth mode, but yeah, being able to really just take all of that data and say like, yeah, okay, we all know, eat more broccoli, less cupcakes, sleep more, don't stress, no alcohol, right? But how can I as an individual, how can you as an individual really start to kind of calibrate more specifically? And I think my overall goal with Mosaic is to really be able to take all of that data to influence population health. Excuse me. Right now we're working with special operations communities and professional athletes, but we will be expanding out to kind of a more direct to consumer model quite soon. So that does take a lot of my time. And then of course my family is a huge priority, but I do still see clients one-on-one, and then I work on contracts with the government in various modes, but
right.
yeah, I take a few clients every now and then. It's at this point I'm pretty referral only, but always happy to take a referral from friends. So
cool. Well, if any friends want to reach you through me or somehow be connected to you, how might you recommend that? And also talk about your book too.
Yeah, so I have a book, Your DNA, Your Life. It's on Amazon. I actually was just thinking I should probably time to write an optimization version. So I don't know. See if
free time. Yeah, lots of it.
Yeah, we'll see. Probably in the next 2 years. And that's on Amazon. And that one's really just like, these are the simple things you need to do. You don't need like to look at your blood work. You don't need to do, it's really just the basics, like what does apply to everyone, and then maybe some more specific things that you could do. But when I work with people one-on-one, it's like full on like blood labs, genetic testing. And I really am starting to find that more people are coming to me kind of for leadership, decision-making, transitions from maybe the elite landscapes into executive roles. And then it really becomes a lot of work, of internal work, really. And really all of those calibrations. And it's so hyper specific to the individual that I've found no one person ends up being like, hey, we're going to do this or that. I'm like, I'm not really sure what we're going to do. We'll talk,
Right.
We'll figure it out as we go. And then, I've really seen a lot of really amazing transformations from people. And it's just, it's not like why I do that. It just kind of is a lovely bonus when I get an email from someone that's like, my life is different and it's better. And it warms my heart. So, and I love to be a part of that. And I'm so honored that people would include me in that journey. So,
well, I can confirm that your success in the world, because we share a client, and I hear a lot from him about your all's work. So, which is very cool. But if people actually want to contact you, you said your book's on Amazon, cool. But if people actually want to get in touch with you, how might they do so?
Yeah, my consulting company is currently Principal Path Consulting. So it's the principalpath.com. And you can also just drop me a email at on ceemcdermott.com. It's just a contact page there.
Awesome.
So kind of stealth mode currently, but
happy
to chat at once.
Right on.
Talk about anything, or even just I always love to hear what people are up to, what research people are doing, and I love to connect with people and just hear new perspectives and see like what's new, what's the next thing.
Awesome. Cee McDermott, thank you for joining me for this conversation. It's good to see you, and I appreciate your wisdom today.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
All right, take care.
Hey, y'all, if you enjoyed the episode, reach out on all the different platforms that Resilience Redefined is on, including Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter. Let me know your thoughts, and if you have any suggestions for future guests, don't hesitate to reach out and let me know.